The drought of 2024 would prove to be Alaska's most severe in recorded history. But for investigators, it would also become the key that unlocked one of the state's most enduring mysteries. On a humid May morning, an urban explorer named Marcus Chen was documenting the receding waters of Copper River when his camera caught something unusual among the exposed riverbank debris. A faded orange waterproof duffel bag, the kind popular with outdoor enthusiasts in the mid-90s, lay partially buried in decades of silt. What Marcus discovered inside that bag would reopen a case that had haunted Alaska for 29 years. Three college friends had vanished on what should have been a routine rafting trip in the summer of 1995. Justin Ryan Caldwell, Kyle Peterson, and Derek Olson had set out on June 15th for a three-day adventure down Copper River. They never returned. The discovery of Justin's duffel bag, preserved by its waterproof seal, contained items that would finally reveal the shocking truth about what really happened during those fateful days. Before we begin the story, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. We're really curious where you're tuning in from. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a rating. The morning of June 15, 1995, had started like any other summer day in Fairbanks. The temperature was already climbing past 70 degrees by 8 o'clock when the three friends pulled into June's Diner in Kyle's red Jeep Cherokee. The waitress who served them that morning would later remember their excitement. They ordered the lumberjack special, pancakes, eggs, and bacon, and talked animatedly about the rapids they planned to conquer. Justin, 21 years old and studying environmental science at University of Alaska, was the natural leader of the group. His infectious enthusiasm had convinced Kyle and Derek to join him on this adventure. But beneath the surface, tensions were already brewing. 6 days earlier, Justin had received an acceptance letter for a prestigious environmental study grant that would send him to Costa Rica for a semester. The grant came with a $15,000 stipend, money that would change his life. Kyle Peterson, his roommate since freshman year, had applied for the same program and been rejected. At 20 years old, Kyle worked part-time at Radio Shack to barely afford college, while everything seemed to come easily to Justin. The rejection letter had arrived the same day as Justin's acceptance. Kyle hadn't mentioned it to anyone, but the resentment was eating at him. Derek Olson was the wild card of the group. At 22, he was older, having taken a gap year after high school to work on fishing boats in the Bering Sea. He'd returned to Fairbanks with money in his pocket and stories that impressed the college crowd. But those who looked closer might have noticed that Derek's lifestyle didn't quite match his supposed savings from fishing. He drove a newer Ford F-150, wore expensive Nike Air Jordans, and always seemed to have cash for concerts and parties. His apartment near campus was filled with electronics that seemed beyond a college student's budget. A Sony Trinitron TV, a high-end stereo system, and one of the new PlayStation consoles that had just come out. The morning at the diner, witnesses would later recall an odd tension at their table. The waitress remembered Kyle barely touching his food, while Justin excitedly showed them something on a map. Derek kept checking his Motorola pager, which beeped twice during breakfast. Each time, he would glance at it and then quickly put it away. The messages, investigators would later discover, were from someone using the code 907, a number that would become crucial to understanding what happened next. After breakfast, around 9:30, they stopped at the Blockbuster Video on College Road. The receipt, found decades later during the investigation, showed they rented two movies at 9:47 a.m., Pulp Fiction and Dumb and Dumber. The clerk who worked that morning didn't remember anything unusual, just three college guys grabbing movies. But the timestamp on that receipt would later become crucial evidence of a carefully constructed lie. The phone records from that morning revealed the first piece of the deception. At 7 a.m., before meeting for breakfast, Kyle had made a 12-minute call from his apartment landline. He'd told investigators in 1995 that he was calling his parents in Minnesota. But when the records were pulled in 2024 using digitized Bell Atlantic archives, the number traced to a house in North Pole, Alaska, just outside Fairbanks. The residence belonged to a known drug dealer who'd been arrested multiple times in the mid-90s. Kyle had been calling Derek's contact, a detail he'd hidden for 29 years. Megan Goldstein had been dating Justin for 6 months in 1995. She was supposed to join them on the trip originally, but had canceled at the last minute, claiming she needed to study for a summer course final, but that was a lie. The real reason she didn't go was because she and Justin had been fighting about something much more serious than anyone knew. Justin had recently discovered something about the local mining operations along Copper River, illegal dumping that was poisoning the water. He'd been gathering evidence for weeks, taking photographs, collecting water samples. Megan knew about all of it, had even helped him document some of the evidence. But she also knew something Justin didn't, that Derek was connected to the people responsible for the illegal dumping. Aaron Mueller was the last person to officially see the 3 friends alive. He'd been working as a river guide for 5 summers and knew Copper River better than most. He encountered Justin, Kyle, and Derek at the Chatina Put-In around 2 p.m. In his original 1995 statement, Aaron describes them as excited and well-prepared. But in 2024, when shown the VHS tape recovered from the duffel bag, his memory sharpened. There had been an argument, not a friendly disagreement, but a real confrontation. He remembered Megan being there too, something he'd never mentioned before because no one had asked about her specifically. She'd been standing by Kyle's Jeep, and he'd seen her talking intensely with the 3 men before they launched. The VHS tape revealed more than anyone expected. When forensic experts enhanced the footage in 2024, they discovered something that had been invisible to the naked eye in 1995. In one frame, as the camera panned across their supplies, Justin could be seen carefully placing something inside the raft's internal lining, a manila envelope wrapped in plastic. His movements were deliberate, secretive. Neither Kyle nor Derek appeared to notice what he was doing. The envelope contained the evidence about the illegal mining operation, photographs that could shut down a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise. At 2:15 p.m., Justin's parents in Anchorage received a page from their son. The numeric code spelled out "running late" using the pager's number-to-letter system. But the pager records, when analyzed decades later, revealed something disturbing. The message had been sent from a location 10 miles downstream from where the group supposedly was at that time. Someone had sent that message to create a false timeline, to make it seem like the 3 friends were still together and safe when something had already gone terribly wrong. The original search effort in 1995 had been extensive but focused on the wrong area. Search teams had covered 40 miles of the main river channel, but they'd never searched the northern fork where Derek had mentioned they might go. A single paddle was found 3 miles downstream from the launch point, carefully placed to suggest they'd had an accident in the rapids. But the paddle showed no damage, no signs of the violence that rapid waters would cause. Someone had planted it there. The most damning evidence in the duffel bag was also the smallest, a zipper pull charm with the initials MG engraved on it. Megan had given it to Justin months earlier as a gift, she claimed, but the charm wasn't just on the bag, it was attached with a small safety pin, added recently, not worn from months of use. When investigators examined it closely, they found something hidden inside the charm's hollow back, a tiny piece of paper with 4 numbers, 3547. It was the last 4 digits of the North Pole Drug House phone number. The Blockbuster receipt held another crucial clue. The same account had rented a portable TV/VCR combo unit 3 days earlier, equipment that made no sense for a rafting trip unless you weren't planning to actually go rafting. The unit was never returned, and late fees had accumulated until the account was closed in 1996. But why would 3 friends planning a river adventure need a portable TV? unless the river trip was never the real plan. In Megan's Palm Pilot, recovered from a box in her garage during the 2024 investigation, investigators found notes that changed everything. The device, an early U.S. robotics model, still powered on after they found the right charging cable. Her digital diary entries revealed the truth she'd hidden for 29 years. On June 14th, the night before the trip, she'd written, "Tomorrow we end this. Jay thinks he's going on a river trip. K and D are ready. By tomorrow night, those photos will be destroyed and we'll all be safe. I hate lying to him, but it's the only way to protect everyone." The investigation of 2024 approached the case with technology and perspectives that hadn't existed in 1995. Detective Sarah Mitchell, a specialist in cold cases, began by reconstructing the timeline using every piece of available evidence. The Palm Pilot entries, the pager records, the Blockbuster receipts, each provided a timestamp that helped build a clearer picture of what really happened on June 15, 1995. Kyle Peterson was the first focus of renewed scrutiny. Now 49 years old and living in Portland, Oregon, he worked as an environmental consultant, ironically, the career Justin had been pursuing. When contacted by Detective Mitchell, Kyle seemed genuinely shocked that the case was being reopened. He flew to Alaska voluntarily, bringing boxes of old photos and letters he'd kept from college. His eagerness to help seemed almost rehearsed, as if he'd been preparing for this moment for 29 years. During his 2024 interview, Kyle's story had subtle changes from his 1995 statement. Originally, he'd said the trip was Justin's idea, planned weeks in advance. Now he admitted it had been more spontaneous, suggested by Derek just a week before. He also revealed new information about Justin's grant acceptance, and the resentment was still there, barely concealed. "Justin always got everything," Kyle said, his voice tight. "That grant should have been mine. I had better grades, better recommendations. But Justin had that way about him. He could charm anyone." The credit card records from 1995 painted a troubling picture. Kyle's Discover card showed a charge at a Tesoro gas station in Glen Ellen at 6:47 p.m. on June 15th, 50 miles from where they should have been on the river. When first questioned in 1995, Kyle claimed he'd lost his wallet before the trip. But the ATM security photo, retrieved from microfilm archives, clearly showed Kyle at the gas pump. He was alone, no sign of Justin or Derek. The timestamp proved Kyle had never been on the river that afternoon. Derek Olson proved harder to track down. After 1995, he'd moved frequently: Seattle, Los Angeles, Las Vegas. By 2024, he was working under the name Derek Oliver as a casino floor manager in Reno. When investigators found him, he was no longer the confident young man from the photos. At 51, Derek looked worn down by decades of looking over his shoulder. He agreed to speak with investigators, but insisted on having his lawyer present. The AOL chat logs, recovered from archived data, revealed Derek's secret life in 1995. Using the screen name AK Ice 95, he'd been actively involved in discussions about moving product through Alaska. One message, sent June 13th, stood out. "Big score coming. 3 days and I'm out of this frozen wasteland." Another user, Northstar907, had replied, "The photos better be destroyed. No loose ends." The photos Derek was referring to weren't drug-related. They were Justin's environmental evidence that threatened to expose the illegal mining operation run by Derek's associates. Megan Goldstein's role became increasingly significant as the investigation progressed. Her initial claim of studying for finals on June 15th fell apart when university records showed she had no exams that week. When confronted with the Palm Pilot evidence, she finally began to crack. But she still insisted she'd been trying to protect Justin, not harm him. She claimed Kyle and Derek had threatened her, forced her to help with their plan. But the evidence suggested something very different. The VHS tape underwent extensive analysis. The FBI's technical division, using software that hadn't existed in the 90s, stabilized and enhanced every frame. At the 17-minute mark, the camera had been set down while still recording. It captured a crucial conversation in the background. Derek's voice was clear. "Megan says he hid copies. We need to find them all." Kyle responded, "She's sure about the meeting spot?" Then Justin's voice, distant but audible, "Hey, where's Megan? I thought she was coming to see us off." The other two assured him she was studying. But Megan had been there, just out of sight, orchestrating everything. Detective Mitchell traveled to Costa Rica to investigate the environmental grant Justin had received. The program director remembered Justin's application clearly. It had focused on industrial pollution in Alaska's rivers. Justin had submitted preliminary evidence that showed serious violations. But the grant committee had also received a strange call the day before Justin disappeared. A woman, claiming to be Justin's girlfriend, had said he was having second thoughts about accepting the grant, that he might withdraw his application. The caller had been Megan. The notebook found in the duffel bag contained more than just Justin's research. The final pages had been written in a different hand, Megan's. She'd made notes about the meeting locations, the timeline for June 15th, even a crude map of the Northern Fork. But most revealing was a list titled "After Tomorrow" that included K gets the grant money, D clears his debts, and M keeps everyone safe. The M was Megan herself, revealing her role as the orchestrator, not a victim. The investigation uncovered Megan's connection to the mining operation. Her uncle, Thomas Goldstein, was a silent partner in Northern Mining LLC. He'd been using family money to fund the illegal operation, and if Justin's evidence had gone public, it would have destroyed not just the company, but the entire Goldstein family fortune. Megan had known about her uncle's involvement for months. She'd been feeding Justin information about the mining sites, pretending to help his investigation while actually controlling what he discovered. The Polaroid camera in the duffel bag contained 4 photos that had been taken but never ejected. When developed, they revealed the shocking truth. The first 3 showed the rafting preparation, but the 4th was different. It showed Megan at the launch point, standing next to a blue Ford Bronco, the same vehicle Aaron Mueller had remembered arriving after the 3 friends launched. In the photo, Megan was holding something, a second paddle, the one that would later be planted downstream as false evidence. Kyle's financial records revealed more of Megan's manipulation. The $3,000 he'd deposited after the disappearance hadn't come from Derek's drug connections as investigators initially suspected. It had come from Megan. She'd paid Kyle for his role in the deception, money from her family's accounts laundered through multiple ATM deposits to avoid detection. Kyle had thought he was helping Derek steal and sell environmental photos. He didn't know Megan was pulling the strings, that the real plan was much darker. The truth about Derek's involvement was equally complex. The drug connections were real, but they were secondary to his main role. Derek owed money to the wrong people, including some who worked security for Northern Mining. Megan had approached him with a solution: help her deal with the Justin problem and his debts would disappear. Derek had recruited Kyle, playing on his jealousy, while Megan remained in the shadows, the grieving girlfriend who'd lost her boyfriend in a tragic accident. But what really happened to Justin? This was the question Detective Mitchell couldn't stop pursuing. The slashed raft found in 2024 at the Northern Fork suggested violence, but there were no signs of blood, no evidence of a struggle at that location. The raft had been deliberately damaged after being moved there, staged to support the accident narrative. The real confrontation had happened somewhere else. Aaron Mueller, when re-interviewed with all the new evidence, remembered another crucial detail. After the 3 friends had launched, he'd seen the blue Ford Bronco follow the river road north. But he'd also seen something else. A second vehicle, a white van with tinted windows, following the same route about 10 minutes later. The van matched the description of a vehicle owned by Northern Mining's security team in 1995. The pager message sent at 2:15 p.m. took on new meaning. It hadn't been sent by Kyle to buy time. It had been sent by Megan from her location downstream. She'd taken Justin's pager earlier that day during their supposed goodbye at the launch. The message was meant to establish that Justin was still alive and on the river at a time when something very different was happening. Phone records showed Megan had been at a payphone near the Northern Fork at exactly 2:15 p.m. Detective Mitchell discovered something in the evidence that everyone else had missed. The movies rented from Blockbuster, Pulp Fiction, and Dumb and Dumber had never been watched. The tapes were still in their cases, the security seals unbroken, when found in Kyle's apartment during a 1995 search. Why rent movies for a trip you're not taking, unless the rentals were just props, part of establishing a normal morning routine before a supposed accident? The portable TV/VCR combo that had been rented 3 days earlier provided another piece of the puzzle. It was found in 2024 during a search of property that had belonged to Thomas Goldstein. Inside the device's battery compartment, investigators found a microcassette tape. On it was a recording of a phone conversation between Megan and her uncle from June 14, 1995. Megan's voice was clear. "Tomorrow it ends. Justin won't be a problem anymore. Kyle and Derek think they're stealing photos to sell. They have no idea we're going to make sure Justin never tells anyone about the mining operation." Her uncle's response was chilling. "And you're certain they can't trace this back to us?" Megan replied, "I've planned everything. After tomorrow, Justin Caldwell disappears, and I'm just his grieving girlfriend who was studying for finals." Kyle and Derek will be too scared to ever tell the truth, and even if they did, who would believe them? The conversation continued with details about the meeting location at the Northern Fork, the plan to intercept Justin after separating him from the others, and what would happen next. But the tape cut off before revealing Justin's ultimate fate, the microcassette having reached its 30-minute limit. The microcassette recording changed everything. Detective Mitchell immediately obtained warrants for Megan Goldstein's arrest and a comprehensive search of all Goldstein family properties. What they discovered over the next 72 hours would finally reveal the complete truth about Justin Caldwell's disappearance. Megan, faced with the recording of her own voice planning Justin's disappearance, initially maintained her innocence. She claimed the tape was taken out of context, that she'd been coerced by her uncle. But as Detective Mitchell presented piece after piece of evidence, the Palm Pilot entries, the planted paddle, the pager she'd used to send false messages, Megan's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. The breakthrough came when investigators found a storage unit in Anchorage that had been rented under a fake name in 1995. The unit had been paid for in advance for 30 years. It would have remained sealed until 2025 if not for the investigation. Inside, they found the smoking gun, Justin's backpack containing his wallet, his actual pager, and most importantly, a set of photographs showing the illegal mining operation's waste pipes directly feeding into Copper River. But there was something else. A contract dated June 14, 1995, signed by Justin, agreeing to sell his evidence to Northern Mining LLC for $50,000. The contract was a forgery. Handwriting experts confirmed Justin's signature had been traced from his university paperwork. But its existence revealed Megan's original plan, to make it appear that Justin had been willing to sell out his environmental principles for money, then disappeared with the cash. When that plan had failed, she'd shifted to Plan B, the rafting accident. Kyle Peterson, shown the full evidence, finally broke down completely. The real story of June 15, 1995, poured out of him in a 4-hour recorded confession. Megan had convinced him and Derek that Justin was planning to abandon them both to take his grant money and never come back from Costa Rica. She'd shown them fake emails, doctored to look like Justin was mocking them behind their backs, calling Kyle a loser who couldn't even get a scholarship and Derek a small-time dealer going nowhere. The plan, as Kyle understood it, was to confront Justin during the trip and steal the environmental photos he'd hidden. Megan had told them Justin was planning to sell the photos himself and keep all the money. They would take the evidence, split the payment 3 ways, and Justin would be too embarrassed to report them. It was supposed to be bloodless, just friends having a falling out. Kyle and Derek had no idea they were being set up as the fall guys for something much worse. On June 15th, after leaving the diner and Blockbuster, they hadn't gone straight to the river. Instead, following Megan's instructions, they'd driven to a cabin owned by the Goldstein family near the northern fork of Copper River. Megan was waiting there with 2 men Kyle didn't recognize, private security contractors hired by Northern Mining. Justin had been confused, asking what was going on, why Megan was there when she had finals to study for. That's when Megan had revealed her true role. She told Justin she knew about the evidence, about his plans to expose the mining operation. She offered him a choice: take $50,000 and disappear, or face the consequences. Justin had refused, tried to leave. The security contractors had restrained him. Kyle and Derek, realizing they'd been duped, were told they were now accomplices. If they said anything, they'd be framed for Justin's disappearance. What happened next was why Kyle had lived with crushing guilt for 29 years. The security contractors had forced Justin into the white van. Megan had told Kyle and Derek to go to the gas station in Glen Allen to create an alibi showing they'd left the area. She'd promised Justin would be released once he signed over the evidence. Kyle wanted to believe her. He'd driven to Glen Allen, used his credit card as instructed, then gone home and waited for news that Justin had been found safe. That news never came. Derek's testimony, given in exchange for a reduced sentence, corroborated Kyle's account but added crucial details. He'd been more involved with the criminal element than Kyle knew. The drug deaths were actually payments he'd taken from Northern Mining to spy on Justin's investigation. He'd been feeding them information for months, telling them which sites Justin was photographing, which evidence he was gathering. Megan had been his handler, using their relationship to stay close to Justin while protecting her family's interests. The white van with Justin inside had left the cabin heading north. Derek had been ordered to follow in the Bronco to the northern fork, where he and one of the security contractors had slashed the raft and thrown it in the river, along with some camping equipment to stage the accident scene. The plan was to make it look like the 3 friends had attempted the dangerous northern route and capsized. Without bodies, it would be assumed they'd been swept away by the current. But Justin Caldwell's body was never found because he never went into the river. The investigation uncovered Northern Mining's private flight logs from 1995 stored in a warehouse after the company's dissolution. On June 15th at 11:47 p.m., a small charter plane had taken off from a private airstrip near the Northern Fork. The flight plan showed a destination of Seattle with 1 passenger listed as Jay Rivers, the same name that would appear 2 days later when an injured man was found on Richardson Highway. But that man wasn't Justin. The truth was more sinister. The injured man was one of the security contractors staged to create a false lead. If anyone connected him to the missing Rafters, it would seem like Justin had survived and chosen to disappear. Meanwhile, the real Justin Caldwell had been on that plane, sedated and restrained, being transported out of Alaska. Northern Mining had facilities across the Pacific Northwest. They couldn't kill Justin, too risky, too many potential connections to them. But they could make him disappear. Megan's uncle, Thomas Goldstein, had been arrested in 2024 based on the evidence. Facing life in prison, he made a deal. In exchange for revealing Justin's fate, he would testify against everyone involved. His revelation sent shockwaves through the investigation. Justin had been kept at a remote mining camp in British Columbia for 3 months. held until the search was called off and the case went cold. Then he'd been given a choice: accept a new identity and never return to Alaska, or face a fatal accident. Justin had chosen to live. The program was like witness protection in reverse. Northern Mining had connections to document forgers, people who could create entirely new identities. Justin became Michael Thompson, a drifter with no past, no family, no connections. He was given $10,000 and a bus ticket to anywhere he wanted to go, with the understanding that if he ever tried to contact his old life or expose the mining operation, everyone he cared about would pay the price. But Justin hadn't stayed silent. The environmental organization in Eugene, Oregon, led by Jonathan Riverside, had indeed been Justin's creation. Unable to abandon his calling, he'd spent 29 years anonymously feeding information to federal agencies, slowly dismantling the network that had destroyed his life. Every mining violation reported, every executive imprisoned, had been Justin's revenge, executed carefully to never trace back to him. When the investigation went public in 2024, Jonathan Riverside had vanished. Because Justin knew his time was up. Megan would talk, the truth would come out, and Northern Mining's surviving associates would know he'd broken his silence. The Polaroid photo Megan received, the man by the river in a flannel shirt, had been Justin's way of saying goodbye. He'd survived once by disappearing. Now he would have to disappear again. Megan Goldstein was arrested on charges of kidnapping, conspiracy, and false imprisonment. During her trial, the full extent of her manipulation was revealed. She'd never loved Justin. Their entire relationship had been orchestrated by her uncle to keep tabs on Justin's environmental research. Every moment of affection, every shared memory had been a lie. She'd played the role of the devoted girlfriend while secretly orchestrating his disappearance. The jury took just 3 hours to convict her on all charges. Kyle Peterson pleaded guilty to conspiracy and received 5 years probation with community service. The court recognized he'd been manipulated and had genuinely believed no one would be hurt. He continues to live with the guilt of that day, donating most of his income to missing persons organizations. He's never forgiven himself for believing Megan's lies. Derek Olson was convicted of conspiracy and evidence tampering. He received 8 years in federal prison. His role as an informant for Northern Mining earned him additional charges. During sentencing, he broke down, saying he'd traded his friend's life for money he never even received. Megan and her uncle had played him just as thoroughly as they'd played Kyle. Thomas Goldstein died in federal prison in 2026 while serving a life sentence. Northern Mining's executives were prosecuted for environmental crimes and conspiracy. The illegal dumping sites were cleaned up, funded by asset forfeiture from the convicted criminals. Copper River, after 30 years of poison, finally began to heal. Justin's parents, now in their 70s, received confirmation their son had survived the initial disappearance. But the FBI could not locate him in 2024. The Jonathan Riverside identity had been abandoned, all traces erased. Wherever Justin was now, he'd learned to disappear completely. His parents took some comfort in knowing he was alive somewhere, even if they'd never see him again. Aaron Mueller, the river guide, still runs tours on Copper River. He added a stop at the Northern Fork, not to tell tourists about the crime, but to talk about environmental protection. He'd learned that the river he loved had been slowly poisoned for years. Now he teaches others to recognize the signs of illegal dumping, to be guardians of the waterways. Sometimes he wonders if Justin is out there somewhere, still fighting the same fight. The orange duffel bag that started the investigation is now in the FBI's Cold Case Museum. It serves as a reminder that evidence can surface decades later, that justice delayed doesn't have to mean justice denied. The VHS tape, the Palm Pilot, the Polaroid photos, all preserved as testimony to how one person's determination to expose environmental crimes led to their life being stolen. Detective Sarah Mitchell received a commendation for solving the 29-year-old case, but she often thinks about Justin Caldwell, somewhere out there under another name, another life. She'd solved the mystery of what happened, but not the tragedy of a young man whose passion for protecting the environment had cost him everything: his identity, his family, his future. In her final report, Mitchell wrote, "Justin Ryan Caldwell disappeared on June 15, 1995, not into Copper River's rapids, but into a shadow life forced upon him by those who valued profit over both the environment and human life. While justice has been served to his captors and conspirators, true justice would be Justin being able to reclaim his name, his life, his family. That justice remains elusive." The case officially closed in 2024 with multiple convictions, but somewhere, perhaps reading about it in the news, a man in his 50s with a different name and a careful, quiet life might have felt a mixture of vindication and loss. The truth was finally known. His friends had been manipulated, not willing betrayers. The woman he'd loved had never existed. Megan had been a fiction, a performance. The evidence he'd gathered had eventually led to justice, even if not in the way he'd planned. Megan Goldstein, serving 25 to life in federal prison, maintains a different version of events. She claims she was protecting Justin, that her uncle had threatened to kill him if she didn't cooperate. But the evidence, her own Palm Pilot entries, the recorded conversation, the forged contract, tells a different story. She was the architect of Justin's disappearance, the master manipulator who'd used everyone's trust against them. In prison, she works in the library, helping other inmates with legal research. Guards report she never receives visitors, never makes phone calls. She's created her own prison within prison, isolated by the magnitude of her betrayal. The woman who'd orchestrated such an elaborate deception now lives in a 6-by-8 cell. Her only power, the books she organizes according to the Dewey Decimal System. The Copper River continues to flow, cleaner now than it's been in decades. Environmental protections, strengthened by the scandal of the 1995 case, ensure no company can poison its waters again. Salmon have returned in record numbers. Eagles soar above rapids that once ran toxic. The river has healed, even if the people touched by that summer never fully can. Every spring, when the snow melts and the river runs high, locals say you can still feel something unsettled about the northern fork. Not supernatural, but a reminder that some secrets are written in the landscape itself. The drought of 2024 had revealed the truth hidden in dried silt and receding waters, but the river keeps its deepest secret. Whether Justin Caldwell ever stood by its banks again, free to be himself, or whether he remains forever Michael Thompson or Jonathan Riverside or whatever name he carries now. The 1995 Copper River rafting mystery is solved in the legal sense. 3 college friends went on a trip they never took. One was imprisoned by those who feared his environmental activism. 2 were manipulated into becoming unwitting accomplices. And behind it all, a young woman named Megan Goldstein pulled the strings, orchestrating a disappearance that would take 29 years to unravel. Justice came late, but it came. The environment Justin had tried to protect was finally safeguarded. His captors were punished. The truth was revealed. But for Justin himself, justice remains incomplete. A man robbed of his identity, forced to live as a ghost, a casualty of greed and deception, whose only crime was trying to save a river. The orange duffel bag, preserved in evidence, contained more than just artifacts from 1995. It contained the proof that Megan Goldstein, the grieving girlfriend who'd helped search for her missing boyfriend, who'd comforted his parents, who'd spoken at memorial services with tears streaming down her face, had been the puppet master all along. Her tears had been real, tears of relief that her plan had worked, that she'd protected her family's fortune, that 3 young men had vanished exactly as she'd orchestrated. The case stands as a reminder that the most dangerous predators don't always lurk in dark alleys or break down doors. Sometimes they share your bed, hold your hand, tell you they love you while planning your disappearance. Megan Goldstein had been the perfect girlfriend, supportive of Justin's environmental work, encouraging his research, helping him gather evidence, all while reporting every move to her uncle, setting up the elaborate trap that would spring on June 15, 1995. The Copper River rafting mystery wasn't about three friends who challenged dangerous rapids and lost. It was about trust betrayed at the deepest level, about love weaponized for greed, about a young woman who'd orchestrated every detail of a disappearance while playing the role of the victim. The river had kept the secret for 29 years until drought finally exposed what Megan Goldstein had hidden. In the end, the river revealed everything: the staged evidence, the hidden truth, and most importantly, the real villain of a story everyone had gotten wrong. The monster wasn't in the water. She'd been on shore the whole time, crying crocodile tears while 3 lives were destroyed by her design.